Hello, friends, and welcome back. What do you think is the hardest part of achieving personal goals or completing personal projects? Is it harder to get started? Is it harder to finish? Or is it harder to get through the messy middle of working on something that'll take months to show results? Well, I think it depends on the kind of project you're working on. It depends on your circumstances and the environment surrounding you working on the project. And it depends on the season of life you're in. Depending on where you find yourself stuck, you may need different tools or tips to get you unstuck. So I'm creating a 3-part video series on how to start, get through the boring middle, and finish our personal projects. For each part of the process, I'll share the most effective tips and tools that I have come across. So today, let's talk about why it's so hard to get started on our projects and how to overcome that. Is there something like a goal or a project that you've been thinking about for a while, but you never seem to get around to? So it stays on your someday list and takes up a lot of your mental bandwidth. Maybe you write the same thing down as a New Year resolution year after year. Maybe you were bold and told a bunch of people that you were going to do this thing, and now you feel bad every time it's brought up. And the problem is that the longer you put it off, the harder it becomes to start. You build up a lot of resistance over time, and it starts to feel like an insurmountable task. But if this is still something you really care about, then why haven't you started? What is holding you up? The bottom line is that the reason why you can't seem to get things going are mostly mental. If you're a perfectionist, you may be stuck trying to come up with a perfect plan from start to finish before you take a single step. But there is such a thing as too much planning, and you really don't need to have everything figured out on day one. In fact, you can't. You are a smart and capable person who will figure things out as they unfold. And if you think about it, nothing major you've accomplished so far went exactly according to your plan. But you were able to navigate through the complexities and get to the end. Or maybe you're waiting for the perfect time to start. You want that perfect clean slate. You're always waiting for the beginning of the week or the beginning of the month, and if things don't go exactly as planned, you wait until the next cycle to start again. But I bet you know this, there is no perfect time to start. The best time is now. In 6 to 8 months or in a year, once you've completed your project or reached your goal, it will not matter that you started on June 28th versus July 1st. Whether you started on a Monday or a Friday, it simply won't matter. The only thing that is important is that you started. Another reason you might be procrastinating on starting is because you don't want to do a bad job. That's that perfectionism again. As a popular saying goes, if you aim for the moon and miss, you'll still end up among the stars, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. The point is that any project that challenges you is an opportunity for you to grow. You still end up better off for taking it on. Maybe your expectations will morph completely along the way and you'll end up in a different place than you originally expected. Most likely, it'll be a better place than where you are today. You'll still end up better off because of what you had to learn, what you had to overcome, and who you had to become as you pursued something new or something different. And of course, there's always the chance that you'll not only meet your goals, but you'll exceed your own expectations. Either way, it is likely to be a win. So the first tip to get started on a new project is something a lot of us know but struggle to implement. Break it into smaller pieces. Hear me out. If you're stuck at the very beginning of a project, you're most likely overwhelmed by the size of it, or you're not quite sure, you don't have clarity on where to start. So you really need to break up your big project into its major components or major milestones. Then take that first component or milestone and break it down further. You can break this all down using a list format, or you could borrow a visual tool from the project management discipline. In project management, we use a tool called the work breakdown structure to decompose a complex project into its components. These components can be represented as sub-projects or project phases or major deliverables. Then we break each component into smaller activities and tasks. You can even get more granular than this picture and add smaller deliverables or further break down the task into subtasks if you want to. The idea is to get to a level of granularity that feels doable. Once you've determined your first milestone, you don't really have to worry about the details beyond this point. By the time you reach this first milestone, you'll have a much better insight into your project and you'll have a better sense of what it'll take for you to get to the next level. There's really no benefit to worry about challenges 4 steps ahead when you haven't taken the first step yet. Things can change drastically by the time you get to step 4. Trying to plan it all out in the beginning is not realistic because you're making a lot of assumptions. And if this project or goal is something new that you've never done before, how can you expect to know every step of the way in advance? Let's say that your goal is to write a book. An oversimplified work breakdown structure might look something like this. To be fair, writing a book probably requires more than the steps that are on this page. Maybe there's some research on the front end that needs to be done. Maybe there's a book cover design on the back end. Maybe there's a final phase for launching the book and doing all the promo work. But for the sake of this example, let's just say that these are the 4 major phases. To get started, you don't have to have all the tasks and subtasks identified for every single phase, especially if these phases are all sequential. You just need to plan the details of the very first phase. The goal is to plan just enough to get the ball rolling and start building some momentum. As you complete the first phase, then you can plan the second phase in detail. And this is what this project could look like as a list. You can make this list as simple or as high-tech as you want. But if you like that visual work breakdown structure, you can even use post-it notes to create that pyramid shape. Just don't let figuring out the right tools or figuring out the right format become a form of procrastination. Pick something and move forward. Once you've taken this big, amorphous, complex project and broken it into little chunks, your next step is to focus on one chunk at a time. So take your first milestone or chunk of work and identify the immediate next action. This immediate next action has to feel easy and absolutely doable. It has to be an activity that can be completed in one single session. So if your first mini milestone is to write the first chapter, the immediate next action may be to write the first page or write a certain number of words. Figure out a next action that feels simple to do and easy to accomplish. Again, I know that this makes sense intellectually, but your instinct will be to try to override that. See, we don't really like to set easy goals for ourselves, as counterintuitive as it may be. Sometimes we don't really want to do easy things because we want the accolades that come with doing difficult things. We like the bragging rights that come with doing hard stuff. We think the hard stuff is more valuable. And sometimes we're just overly ambitious. If a task seems too easy, we discount it and we feel like it's not enough. We think that if we set a slightly bigger goal, we'll be more productive. We'll get much more done and we'll get to our results much faster. But that is a trap because it usually backfires. When we make the next action too big, we end up doing nothing because we feel overwhelmed. And you'll know that your next action is too big if you keep putting it off or keep dreading doing it. So if your next action still feels too daunting, you need to cut it down some more. It is much better to set a goal to write one paragraph and actually do it than to set a goal to write a whole page and write nothing. Remember, progress over perfection. When you write your to-do list, don't write broad actions like work on the book or write chapter 1. Make your to-do items more narrow and more specific. Something like write one paragraph, or write 300 words, or write 10 sentences, something like that. By now, you've broken down your big, ambitious project into more manageable chunks. You've picked one chunk to focus on, and you've identified the immediate next action you need to take to get the ball rolling. It should feel a lot easier to get started. If you can stop trying to think multiple steps ahead, trying to solve problems you don't even have yet, and focus on the very next action, your resistance will simply melt away. Trust the fact that you will figure out future challenges if and when they present themselves. You don't have to solve everything today. Try to zoom in and focus on accomplishing the very next milestone instead of constantly thinking about and trying to figure out the entire project. And you will find that it will feel a lot more manageable to take the next action. If you are clear on what you need to do next, but still struggling to get it done, try one of my favorite productivity tricks and set a timer for 15 to 30 minutes depending on the level of resistance you feel. More resistance means pick a smaller amount of time. Do as much as you can to complete your next action within that time. If you don't get it all done in that amount of time, then take a little break and try again. You can do anything for 15 to 30 minutes. I hope this video helps you overcome some of the resistance you've been accumulating towards working on a project or goal that matters to you. There is no better time than now to get started on it. In the next video, we'll talk about finishing a project you have been stuck on. In the meantime, take really good care of yourself, and I'll see you soon.